r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Lou_NS. Nobody remembers the week the sun went out. I have never thought about any date more. The anniversary is coming up soon. I wonder if that will help anyone remember. I was on a bus then, crawling away from Savannah. I was 19, escaping the maze of concrete that was the city, a pilgrim on the roads leading to places yet discovered, a story I'm sure was shared by so many before me. The bus had traveled just far enough that the vestiges of urbanization had dwindled to withered gas stations and cheap motels, which I couldn't appreciate enough. It was untamed wilderness, it was freedom, and soon, it would almost be the death of me. I checked my watch. 4:12 p.m. August 16, 2019. I looked up into the windows, before all of a sudden, something strange happened. Everything was black. There was nothing. For a second, I thought that I had fainted. But I could still hear the low, endless hum of the bus, and not a moment later, the screams of everyone around me. The words "I can't see anything" was a shared chorus that rose and fell when we all realized that all our vision had simultaneously fled. The bus reached a swift halt, before I could hear the doors swing open, releasing the stream of passengers onto the road. Last time I had looked out the window, there was nothing, spare the trees and straight, endless road. I stood up, gripping the seat in front of me, before moving to the aisle and pushing my way forward. I could feel hands grasp from either side, searching for something to hold on to. My feet bumped into something sprawled across the floor, but I found no hesitation to continue on, until I climbed out and onto the asphalt. The same commotion had continued on out there. Like so many others, I had left my backpack on the bus, so I turned around and tried to board, but the screams inside made me hesitate, and the flood of people never seemed to stop. I quickly wandered off to the grass by the bus, where the screams still reached, but gradually thinned out. I heard people talking about leaving, finding a way back to Savannah or somewhere else nearby for help. When I found the courage again, I returned to the bus doors and was prepared to climb in before someone spoke to me. "Can you get my stuff?" a man asked. I flinched when he spoke. "My food is in there, and I'm going to need it to leave." "Where are you going?" I asked him. I couldn't fathom walking anywhere. "I'm with a group of 4 other people. There's a military base about 20 miles out. We're going to get help." I was able to grab the man's supplies, but the meager laptop bag didn't seem like it was carrying a lot. When I located him, he was with a group of other people, who I was promptly introduced to. The man who had approached me was Stephen, and he was a physician at the military base. Then there was Claudia, Tess, Marcus, and Wade. We had briefly shared hypotheses about the situation. A gas leak was the only reasonable one that surfaced. We tried to find a way to call the police from each other's cell phones, but either we couldn't find our phones, or none of them even worked. But Stephen promised us that if we contacted the military, we would all be rescued, and they would help us regain our vision. Marcus was the one who created the roll calling system. It was the only way to recognize who was nearby. Marcus would shout roll call and we'd all repeat our names, like in a classroom. Claudia, Wade, Stephen, then me, Chris, and Tess. Once that was instituted, we turned to Stephen for any direction to the military base. "We're on a straight road there," he said. "We must continue forward." So, we did just that. Most of the other bus-formed groups split off, wandering their own ways, branching off into the open woods surrounding. I never knew what they were looking for. Some followed us to the base, but after a while, we gained considerable ground against them, until we never heard them again. Every so often, one member of our group would stop and place their hand on the ground, just to confirm that we were still on the road. Even in a situation like ours, things seemed to slip our mind, and the asphalt would seem to blend in with the rest of our senses, despite the loss of one. We would talk to keep our minds off it, venturing through random topics of our lives, playing games, racing each other. A while passed, before Marcus's voice escaped the front of the group. "Wait, there's something wrong here." When I walked up to him, I could feel my feet fall off the road, and into the grass. "Does the road end?" I asked. "No, it splits." Marcus was right. I moved to my left, then my right, and felt the asphalt continue. The realization set in for all of us as we wandered between the paths. There was a fork in the road. "Which direction do we go, Stephen?" Tess asked. The hesitation that followed wasn't reassuring. "I'm not sure," he finally said. "I've driven this road many times, but if I could just see it." "You're not sure?" Marcus interrupted. I could hear him move to Stephen. "How can't you be sure? You have one job, Steven, and if we go the wrong way to who knows where, we're completely fucked. You're no help either, Steven said. The argument fumed, fueled by exhaustion and delusion. I could hear them grab at each other in the darkness, before Claudia left my side and started towards them. We can't act like children. There's only one way to the military base, so we must choose a side. Steven exhaled before picking a road. I think we go this way. Alright, then let's go, Claudia said, and the rest of the group followed her forward. After a while, we started to slow to a leisurely pace. I don't think any of us were suited to walk for miles, as we had been plucked from our lives and thrown into a situation unfamiliar. I was only wearing everyday clothes inappropriate for walking miles, and the only shoes I sported were a cheap pair of slip-ons. After a few hours of walking, I felt like the only thing left on my feet was a thin sheet of rubber. Not long after, the group called for a break and we slowed to a halt before spilling off the road and migrating to the grass nearby. I let myself fall to the ground, resting my head against the cool dirt, before Tess suddenly spoke. What time is it? I sat up. It was something that had slipped my mind. There was no indication of time now. The tiredness I would usually feel had consumed me after hours of walking. Everything stood stagnant in a haze of warmth and darkness. It was around 4 when it happened, and I think we've been walking for 3 hours, Claudia said. So, it's probably 7. We seemed content to lie down and call it a night. We all formed in a little circle, watching over each other as best we could, before I fell asleep. The next morning, I was awoken by Claudia, who lifted me up and insisted on starting our walk early. There was nothing to wake up to, and my stomach growled. I wondered if we would ever find food out here. Roll call, Marcus said. Claudia. Wade. Steven. Chris. There was a pause. I repeated myself, but Tess's name never followed. We searched for Tess in the grass, our knees pushed in the ground, hands scouring for any vestige of her. I'm sure I looked like Velma, searching for her glasses, combing through the brush. But there was nothing left of her. She must have left in the middle of the night, Marcus said after a while. We just have to move on. Why would she leave? Wade asked. We're in the middle of fucking nowhere. But a response was never given, and we quieted down, before continuing on. I wondered where she could have possibly left for. Did she go back to the bus? Did another group find her? I tried to rake my brain of any possible explanation. There was nothing else said between us, the hot sun beating down as we sluggishly sauntered forward. There was only a small understanding of our goal, to make it to the military base, to see again. But everything else was left up for us to stumble upon. Just before I was about to raise my voice to ask for a break, I heard the roar of engines project from far beyond. I was walking beside the road then, and as I heard the noises approach faster, I barely had enough time to yell, "Everyone, get off the road!" I could feel people fall beside me, and the vehicles rushed past, before continuing on and out of earshot. We all stood for a minute in silence as the dust seemed to settle back into place. Was that the military? Claudia asked. I considered it for a second. Maybe we had chosen the right path. Roll call. Marcus ignored Claudia's question. Claudia. The list abruptly stopped there. We waited for Wade's voice, but it never came. Wade? Marcus said, before the realization hit me. I found my way back onto the road and bent down again, using my hands and feet to find something. I came upon it faster than I expected. All I could feel was a mess of clothing, pressed against the asphalt, and what I then presumed was the head. I jumped back when I felt the guts, mushy and hot. He's there, the words escaped my mouth. That's Wade. No one found the strength to move his body, or whatever remained of it. I could barely believe it, even when we continued on and away from him. Now there were 2 of us gone. I couldn't shake the thought of who would be next. But after Marcus insisted that we had to keep moving, a new thought consumed me. Who were they? If we had screamed for them to stop, would they have? Were they military, or someone else? No one wanted to believe that the vehicles were anything else but soldiers escaping into the city to rescue. Maybe they had found some sort of cure. The rest of the day wasn't very noteworthy. We seemed to grow tired quicker, and I could feel myself grow more and more dehydrated as the temperatures only seemed to rise. No one had food, nor water, or anything else to construct any sort of hope. We only had the military to look forward to, but at the rate we were crawling at, it seemed like a dream that we would never reach. The following day was just as similar as the last. The morning roll call was thankfully standard, and we were able to start earlier than the day before. We slept that night thirsty and starving. At this rate, it wouldn't be long until one of us succumbed to malnutrition. But the next day brought a new hope. We were crawling along the road, our steps slow and small, until we could hear something from beyond the tree line. It was voices, new and unfamiliar. "Who's out there?" a man called. "How many of you are there?" another asked. This one, a woman. 4, Marcus's voice boomed. "We're from a bus a few miles back. Where are you? Can you see?" Sticks cracked as a group of people seemingly emerged from the brush. I didn't know how many of them there were, but I already felt outnumbered. "We're a family from a town nearby. We can't see anything either," the woman said. "My brother was hurt. Do you have a doctor?" "I'm a physician," Stephen said, and he moved away from my side. The rest of our group instinctively followed. We ventured deep into the woods, far enough that I began wondering why they left someone this far out. But Marcus and Stephen were engaging in an ordinary conversation with the two people, whose names we learned to be Micah and Josephine, so I tried to unarm any doubt I had about them. After a while of walking, Micah finally told us to stop. "We're here, let me go get him," he said, before leaving us. I felt Claudia walk up beside me. "Don't you realize how long we've been walking for?" she asked me. I tried to shrug off her suspicion, but it bit at me, and the darkness didn't help. We stood for a little while, before suddenly, I felt arms behind me, pushing me forward. They threw me onto the dirt, and soon, Claudia and Stephen fell next to me, before Marcus. I heard something escape the trees, and soon, it felt like we were surrounded by people. Marcus tried to regain his ground and stand up, but he was only shoved down again, this time, harder. Foreign hands wrapped tape about my wrists and ankles, preventing me from any sense of movement. To my right, I could hear Claudia and Stephen struggle, as if something similar was being restrained to them. "Roll call," I could barely make out Marcus's whisper. "Claudia. Stephen. Chris." "Be quiet," Micah's voice sounded from in front of me. "If you stay that way, it won't hurt as bad." "What are you even doing?" I heard Marcus's voice again, louder this time. There was a strange tang to it, like disbelief and fear where anger would once stand. "God has left us," Micah said, his voice scratchy. "He has plunged our world into darkness, and has left us to roam it blindly. But there is a way to see again," Josephine added. "I know there is. We tried it on my brother, but it failed. I can't experiment on myself, or Micah, or any other family member anymore. We don't have anything left to test on. Think of yourselves as a sacrifice for a cure. We'll just start down the line." Before I barely have a second to process the situation, Claudia's scream escapes near me, a scream so haunting that I can recall it years later. I hear someone carry her away, so far that I can't hear her anymore. Then I hear Marcus lifted off the ground. He must have been only a person away from me, because I can hear Stephen beside me, begging for Micah to stop, asking him where he is taking them. The footsteps return back to us, and then next to me. Stephen is picked up and thrown forward, towards some unknown place. Just as the footsteps begin their path towards me, I find the sense to scoot backwards, out of the line and away from Micah and Josephine and their group. I hear someone shouting, and as I continue to crawl away, the voices hush, and silence consumes it. It only takes me a second to realize that they are trying to hear me out, waiting for me to even so much as breathe, and close to me, I feel their boots rise and fall, searching the grass for any remnant. After the footsteps wander off, I'm able to peel the tape bindings from my ankles. I stand up, and move in what I can only assume is forward. As I run through the trees, I hear the sticks crack beneath my shoes, but the sound only excels me, until I escape before I hear a sound rising from the distance. The sound of engines. But these engines blare differently. They are louder and more numerous. Suddenly, a voice booms across the road, and I instantly move backwards. "United States military," a radio blares. "Help is coming." I run towards the road, but the vehicles have long passed when I reach it. I collapse on the ground, my mind and legs in a similar throbbing pain. I laid that way for what felt like hours, until I opened my eyes, and I was back on the bus. I lift my watch up to my face, but I can barely comprehend the date. August 23, 2019. 5 days since the beginning.